Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 267 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Ilon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and a two-time author. Our second book is called From Letters to Leaders, Redefining New Member Education and Leveraging Belonging to Eliminate Hazing. Go and pick up that book today on Amazon. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring college students together. Fun fact, as a volunteer for my fraternity, I did a ton of work with our Cornell chapter, and I was blown away at the quality of the students on campus. The alumni network was just tremendous, and the stunning beauty of that campus and all the gorges in town. You know, I secretly want my daughter to go there, so let's see what happens, because I just want to spend more time on that beautiful, beautiful campus. Now, our next guest is Patricia Stahl. Patty is a therapist in private practice specializing in social anxiety. Again and again in her work, she has witnessed firsthand how enduring bullying as a child can leave painful scars that are carried into adulthood. And this pain was brought home for her on a personal level when one of her sons began being bullied at his elementary school, an experience that served as the original inspiration for this project. Her goal is to empower kids with useful insights and strategies for navigating the challenges of bullying, ultimately surviving and thriving. She has a bachelor's degree in social psychology from Cornell and a master of social work from the University of Texas in Arlington. And now she is a native of Dallas, Texas. Welcome to the show, Patty.
Well, thanks, Mike. I'm so glad to be here.
Well, listen, I tell you what, your experience is just amazing. And I saw so many similarities to the fraternity and sorority community between bullying that you were talking about on an elementary school level, and even really the hazing that we see in fraternities and sororities on college campuses. So I think it's going to be really helpful for our audience to learn more from you, because I think it can explain some of the behaviors that we see on college campuses as well. So, you know, let's go back to your time at Cornell, because, you know, you had the just amazing fortune of being able to do your undergraduate experience at Cornell, which is stunning. And I'm sure you had plenty of options as an undergrad. You could have gone to a lot of schools. So why did you choose Cornell of all places?
Well, I'd like to say it was because of the quality of certain professors, but it wasn't. It was because, like you said, it was a gorgeous campus. I was trying to decide between it and Northwestern. That was my second choice, and they're really different. I have to say that I probably chose Cornell partially because my father went there and really wanted me to go there because he had a wonderful experience there. So that's what tipped the scales, I think.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. Listen, if I was a Cornell grad, you better believe I'd be pushing all my kids to go to Cornell too. But I just wasn't smart enough to get into Cornell. Now, my kids, on the other hand, that's a whole nother story. This generation is much smarter than their old man. And so they make me look like an idiot when they look at my SAT scores.
I doubt it. I doubt it.
Now, let's talk a little bit about your personal mission here, because really, you know, one of your sons was bullied in elementary school. Talk to our audience. What happened to him, and how did you work through that time with your own son?
Yeah, well, my son was kind of small for his age. He started a new school in 5th grade, and big mistake. I was worried about his carrying this heavy backpack full of books. So I insisted that he get a rolling backpack. Little did I know that that was not going to go over very well with the other students. So there was this one boy who was in his class, but had been at the school for a while and was a lot bigger. And he decided to start picking on my son and calling him a loser and kicking the backpack into the woods, that kind of thing. Obviously my son wasn't happy about it. It was hard for my husband and me, and we really weren't sure what to do. When I mentioned it to somebody at the school, and of course their response was boys will be boys, because that's the way they responded in those days, not so much anymore. So I came up with this kind of quirky solution, which actually worked. one day I told my son that I would give him, I think it was a quarter, every time this boy called him a loser. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And I said, yeah, just try it and tell the bully, whose name was Nick, tell Nick that I'm going to pay you every time he calls you a loser. So he didn't look like he was going to do it. But in fact, later that week, he came back home and had this big smile on his face and said, you owe me a quarter. And I said, just one quarter? I said, what happened? He said, well, I told Nick to call me a loser. And he said, why? And I said, well, just call me a loser. And he was really not wanting to do it. He said, why should I call you a loser? And I said, my mother's going to pay me every time you call me a loser. So call me a loser. Well, Nick refused to call him a loser. And he never called him a loser again. And it was really funny because later that same day, Nick needed to borrow a pencil. And he asked Travis for a pencil. My son's name is Travis. He asked Travis for a pencil, and Travis said, only if you'll call me a loser. And Nick wouldn't call him a loser, so he didn't get the pencil, and my son never got bullied by him again.
Wow, what a story. So now, fast forward, you're a therapist in private practice. You specialize in social anxiety. And hazing happens to way too many college students. We see it in athletics. We see it in the band. We certainly see it in fraternities and sororities as well. Can you give our audience a little more information about what happens to people as adults when they experience that kind of bullying trauma as a child or a young adult?
Yeah, you use the right word, trauma. It doesn't affect everybody the same way. It can really lead to PTSD, especially if, for instance, they're getting hazed in a humiliating way, which is usually the case. If they were bullied as a child, it just kind of reinforces all those feelings they had when they were bullied, and that makes the hazing a whole lot worse. But besides PTSD, it's depression, anxiety, low grades, low self-esteem, self-medicating with alcohol and drugs, and my specialty, social anxiety, where they have difficulty with relationships, they don't trust other people, they avoid certain social situations for fear of being judged, because social anxiety is all about a fear of being judged negatively by people. So if they've had that experience, then they worry forevermore that people are going to find them lacking in some way.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that, because, it just seems like, when I look at some of the comments in places, like social media, it seems like, a lot of today's college students think that that's the only way to build camaraderie and brotherhood is to haze each other. Mental or physical abuse is how I'm defining hazing. And I'm saying to myself, that's not good for you. Like, there's going to be ramifications down the line. So I'm so happy that you shared that. And I think you also mentioned another point, which we should stress, which is that when college students get to college and they decide to join your fraternity or sorority, for example, you have no idea what trauma they've been through before they got there. Exactly. And what is going to trigger them. So your hazing could trigger them and send them into a tailspin that they are never going to recover from. And there's numerous examples that I can point to. But, that's the thing. We make all these assumptions, but we really don't know what trauma they've been through, right?
Exactly. I don't know whether they've been bullied, don't know what may have happened. Maybe they have some other kind of emotional disturbance going on. Maybe they may be on medication. Who knows what? Yeah. But these kids are going to try to fit in, and they won't mention some of those things that are pretty important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What strategies should college students be thinking about if they are being bullied right now or they're being hazed in college? What should they do?
Well, I think I'll start with hazing because, I know less about that. You're being hazed because you've chosen to try to get into this organization, whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. So it's different from bullying where you feel totally powerless. But I think an important thing to remember for anyone who's going through hazing is that you can get out at any time. It's your choice. So if it feels like it's just too much for you, you may just have to leave. You'll have to deal with some repercussions probably, but you're not trapped. I think that feeling of being trapped is part of the worst of that. And I think it's a good idea, if you've already been through the hazing and you're suffering some after effects, to talk to other people, other kids who have been through it, and share your experiences. And if you still find that you're having trouble sleeping, or you're having nightmares, or you're having flashbacks, or you just know that you're still being affected by the hazing, that you find a professional and talk about it. Now, as far as the bullying goes, you have strategies that involve interacting with the bully. You don't have that really with hazing. You're not trying to disarm the hazer, but you are trying to disarm the bully. And I think the most important advice is that you don't react when you're being bullied, that you don't cry, you don't look upset, you don't get angry, none of that, because you're giving the bully what he or she wants. When you do that, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for a reaction from you. So if you can play it cool, which is very difficult to do, but you can practice it, then you've got it made. And I say practice it. You could role play with a parent or a friend where they say insulting things to you, and you just act like, yeah, okay. The idea is that you're indifferent to it. As a matter of fact, Tiger Woods talked about the fact that his father would help Tiger deal with potential racist remarks by barraging him with racist comments while he was practicing his golf, until Tiger got to the point where he didn't even notice them anymore. So you can role play, but I think a wonderful technique is an assertiveness technique called fogging. And what you do with fogging is you agree with part of the criticism. So, for instance, if someone says to you, you're so tall, you look like a giraffe. Okay, it's true that you're tall, right? So you would say, yes, I'm tall. You wouldn't agree with the part that is critical, but you'll agree with the fact, yeah, I'm tall. So it's what you say, and it's how you say it. It's really important to say it in a very self-accepting way. Like, that's okay with me that I'm tall. I have no problem with that. You want to look the bully right in the eyes. You want to stand up straight, and you want to speak in a loud enough voice so that the bully can hear you. One of the comments that I read, James Corden, the comedian?
Yep.
He said, confidence is kryptonite for bullies. And that's true. Bullies, if they think you're confident or what they're doing isn't bothering you, then that takes the wind out of their sails and they'll move on. It's no fun.
Yeah, great strategies. Now, obviously, you're the parent of a kid who was bullied. What suggestions do you have for parents of students who are being bullied or maybe even hazed in college? What should the parents do?
Yeah, well, I think if the parents become informed about strategies, certainly they can help. For instance, I mean, that's what my book is all about, strategies for helping kids deal with bullying. So if parents can become familiar, one thing they can do is role play, as I was saying before. If they learn how to do the fogging technique and they just throw criticisms at their child and let the child eventually be able to respond in a non-affected way. Hazing, you know, it's tough. But I have a friend, her name is Leslie Lanahan. Her son, Gordy Bailey, was hazed at the University of Colorado and died from alcohol poisoning. And she started an organization called the Gordy Foundation, which has a lot of information for parents about hazing. And there's also an organization called Anti-Hazing Coalition.org. So I think that it would be helpful if they went online, found some anti-hazing organizations and kind of connected with them. And of course, well, I should say probably the most important thing is they listen when their child talks about how painful it is. Don't minimize it. You know, a lot of parents minimize hazing or bullying. You know, I went through it, no big deal, but it is a big deal.
I agree with you completely. Now, tell us, what is cognitive challenging and how would that help somebody who's been bullied or maybe even hazed in college?
Yeah, well, cognitive challenging, cognitive restructuring is all about examining what your thoughts are. So you're feeling depressed, you're feeling anxious, You're feeling ashamed, which is, I think, the worst result of being bullied or hazed, that humiliation you feel that leads to a feeling of shame. You look at the feeling, you can't attack the feeling. You can't tell yourself, don't be depressed or don't feel ashamed. I mean, that just really doesn't work. So cognitive restructuring is kind of stepping back, looking at what was I thinking that made me feel this particular way. So I'll give you an example that I always use with my clients. Two guys, Bill and Bob, both go to a party. They meet Susan and they both really like Susan. So Bill calls Susan the Monday night after the party and says, hey, would you like to go out next weekend? And she says, no, I'm sorry, I'm busy. And she hangs up and he says, oh no, she's not telling me that she's lying. I know she's really not busy. I could call her next week, but she doesn't really want to be with me. And I acted like a jerk at the party anyway. And why did I put that lampshade on my head? And oh, I said such stupid things. So I'm not going to call her again. And, I could call Emily, but she probably wouldn't want to go with me either. So the result is that he is depressed and he spends the weekend by himself. The second guy, Bob, also calls Susan on the same night, gets the same response. And he hangs up and he says, darn it, that's too bad. I'm disappointed. I wanted to see her, but I'll try her next week. And in the meantime, I will call Emily and see if she wants to do something. So they both had the same situation, but they had totally different reactions. One was depressed, one was just disappointed. So what's the difference? It's what they told themselves, right, about the situation, their thoughts. So Bill jumped to conclusions. He made assumptions, right? Mm-hmm. He told himself that it was because of some stupid things he did at the party. And he made assumptions that she was lying, that she would never want to go out with him. And that's why he became depressed. He didn't just automatically become depressed simply because she said no. And the second guy, he didn't do that. He didn't jump to conclusions. He looked for evidence. And that's the key when you're trying to challenge your thoughts. Look for evidence. Don't allow yourself to say, I'm going to go to this party and no one's going to like me. Well, what evidence do you have of that? Aren't there people in the world who like you, etc.? So that's what I mean by cognitive restructuring, examining your own thoughts and challenging them.
Those are some great examples that you used, that very, very effective. You're obviously the pro when it comes to social anxiety, and I don't have to tell you, a ton of college students out there are dealing with social anxiety on a daily basis.
Yeah.
What other things should they be doing in order to treat social anxiety?
Right. Well, in case some of your listeners don't know exactly what it is, really social anxiety is a fear of being judged negatively, an assumption that people won't like them or that they have to be perfect in order to be liked, basically. Mm-hmm. So when I treat social anxiety, first of all, I start with relaxation because it is an anxiety and you can't be relaxed and anxious at the same time. So relaxation techniques, a lot of the cognitive stuff I was just talking about, assertiveness training, where they learn to stand up for themselves. And like I said, look people in the eye and stand up straight, that kind of thing. Self-compassion, because boy, they're low on self-compassion, people with social anxiety. They just believe that they're not worthy. So there are a couple of really good books about self-compassion. And then the interesting thing that they have to challenge themselves. Avoidance is their biggest problem. I don't think I'll go to that party because such and such, right? Mm-hmm. Or they'll go, but they'll only go with a crutch like alcohol or drugs, which we call safety behaviors. So they don't trust people because their experience has been that people have let them down, haven't liked them. And the other thing is that they're often people pleasers because they're working so hard to be liked, right? So they have to stop the avoidance. Avoidance is their biggest enemy. And then the most fun part, I think, I do most of my social anxiety treatment in groups. And the most fun part is what we call shame attacking exercises, mm-hmm. where you intentionally embarrass yourself. You go out into the world and do something really difficult, challenging. Like some of my people one man went to a women's clothing store and tried on women's clothing, or went through a cafeteria line and asked for one strawberry and demanded just one strawberry. You know, they've come up with all kinds of funny things, and it's really empowering because you find out that, oh, I can survive being embarrassed. It doesn't kill me, and in a lot of cases, people aren't even noticing the things I'm doing. So those are pretty much the components. I think being in a group is great because they get to get feedback from each other about, you know, oh, I'm blushing so much right now. What, really? I don't even notice it, that kind of thing. So it's exciting. People really can change.
Yeah, that's so helpful to our audience to know that there's hope, that there are some strategies that they can use to get over that social anxiety. I think
Sure.
those are all very, very effective. And I know you wrote a children's book. Tell us about the book. Talk to us a little bit, some of the feedback you've been able to get so far.
Well, I haven't gotten any feedback yet because it just got ready for publication.
Nice.
But it's called From Loser to Legend, kind of like yours, from letters to
Leaders,
right?
Yeah.
It's interesting, the two L's. And I have stories from more than 60 celebrities who have dealt with bullying, and they talk about their strategies and their advice. And I think it's really important because when you're bullied, you feel like it's only you and that there's something wrong with you and that you are in fact a loser. And I think that when people who are being bullied hear about their heroes being bullied, it changes the whole perspective on bullying. And I've got everybody in there from The Rock to Chris Rock, who have talked about being bullied rather.
Yeah.
So you want me to go on about the book?
Sure, why not? Anything else you want to tell us about it? I know you're proud of it.
Well, I'm excited about the fact that I think it'll be empowering for these kids, normalizing and empowering. So like, for instance, Harrison Ford describes himself as having been a real nerdy geek in school. And he used to get pushed down this hill outside of his school over and over. If he got back up, he'd be pushed down again. Eminem was beat up so badly that he got a concussion. And people that you wouldn't expect, right? Mm-hmm. George Clooney had Bell's palsy for a while in high school, and half of his face was paralyzed. And the kids were calling him Frankenstein. And he said it was the worst time of his life, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of them talk about the silver lining. They say that being bullied toughened them up, for instance, so that they could better deal with problems in the future, or it made them more have more empathy for other people, which they appreciate. And the main thing I heard, I think, was that it gave them extra motivation and drive to be successful, to kind of show their bullies that they could be successful, that they were worth it. Yeah. So there are a lot of messages in there, but the most important one, I think, is that the things that they were bullied for, in a lot of cases, ended up being the things that made them into legends.
Right. Yeah, man, oh man. I mean, that's very empowering to just know that all of these people have experienced it and have gone on to wild success. I mean, just wild success.
Exactly.
So it gives everybody hope, right? Isn't that what we all want? It's just hope.
Yeah, right. And to not feel so different, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
not
really
feel
good.
weird in this case.
Well, I tell you what, I mean, George Clooney looks very good today. So, I mean, I don't know what he was bullied about when he was a kid, but he looks great today. So I don't know a single woman that would say no to him for a date. So I'm just saying, he did all right.
Well, and Beyonce, she was called ugly and stupid. And I mean, you know, so
beautiful.
It gives you the message when you read these things that you don't have to believe everything you hear, right?
Amen. Amen. Now, I know you're in Dallas, Texas. I love good food, and there is a million choices to eat in Dallas, Texas. So I want to know, what is your favorite local restaurant in town? So that way I can go and check it out the next time I'm in Dallas. All
right. Well, call me. We'll go together.
Let's go.
I'll tell you, there's one, it's not so much the whole restaurant. There's one food, one food, I guess, that I think is the best thing I've ever eaten, and I would miss it so much if I left. And it's at a restaurant called Nonna, Nonna, and it's a clam pizza. And it's not like a tomato pizza with clams on it. It's some sort of amazing clam sauce on pizza, and it is fabulous. So I would definitely suggest that. And my second choice would probably be the Greek food at a restaurant called Tzatziki's.
Ah, yes. Tzatziki's I've had many, many times. Absolutely delicious. Had that a
Oh,
few
you?
years ago. Oh, yeah. It's fantastic Mediterranean food. It's very, very good. But that clam pizza, that sounds like something I've never tried before. So I have to give that a shot. I'm going to try it and I'm going to let you know when I'm in town. So that way we can go grab some pizza together. Okay.
All right. I'll take any opportunity.
So if our audience members, if they want to connect with you to get help with their social anxiety, or maybe to get some help to deal with some of the trauma that they've been through, where can they go in order to connect with you?
Well, my website is patricia.l.stahl, S-T-A-H-L, @gmail.com. And you can also get me at From Loser to Legend at gmail.com.
Perfect. All right. So you got a couple of email addresses there. Send an email over to Patty and she will help you out right away. Patty, thank you so much for being on the show. I mean, I know, bullying is really kind of your sweet spot, and, just your expertise, I think, is so important to understand what people go through and how that impacts them over a lifetime, because we are seeing some really horrible hazing cases in colleges. And I think it's time that we talk more about it, and do what we can to make sure that everybody is safe, and they get the resources that they need to combat some of the stuff that they see on college campuses. So I really appreciate all the work that you do. It means a lot, and thank you.
Thank you. This was fun.
Very
Bye.
good. Well, thank you so much to our listeners. If you enjoyed this interview with Patty, make sure that you like it. Make sure you share it with other college students, maybe other students that have gone through bullying before. And we hope to see you on another episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Thanks so much, and we will see you next time.